Ladies and gentlemen, announcing the arrival of our guests of honor, please stand. Please remain standing for the Malaysian National Anthem and the Universiti Malaya song. Professor Pam Fredman, President of International Association of Universities, IAU, Hillage Vantland, IAU Secretary General, Professor Dr. Nur Hayati Abu Qasim, Dean, Health and Wellbeing Research Cluster, University of Malaya, and IAU Co-Chair, celebrated Professor Dato' Dr. Norma Mansour, Director of the Social Wellbeing Research Center, University of Malaya, Professor Dr. Nur Saada Abdul Rahman, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation, members of the University of Malaya Management Team, IAU Administrative Board of Directors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and a very good evening to our honorable and respected guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the University of Malaya and to the IAU 2018 inaugural ceremony held in conjunction with the IAU 2018 International Conference co-hosted by the University of Malaya and the IAU. I would like to thank you for joining us today at this special inaugural by a very prominent and distinguished personality, Emeritus Professor Dr. Norma Mansour. She will speak on globalization and single village of knowledge, an issue that is becoming increasingly important today. Before that, let us now watch a short infographic video presentation on the lovely University of Malaya. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, here to speak on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor of University of Malaya, let us now open the ceremony with the welcoming remarks from Professor Dr. Nur Saada Abdul Rahman, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research and Innovation.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon. Emeritus Professor Dr. Nomar Mansour, the Director of Social Wellbeing Research Center, or SWRC, Universiti Malaya. Professor Pam Friedman, President of the International Association of Universities. IAU 2018 co-chairs, Professor Dr. Nohayati Abu Qasim, the Dean of Health and Wellbeing Research Cluster, Universiti Malaya, and Ms. Hilji Van Len, IAU Secretary General. IAU delegates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, It is indeed our pleasure to host the IAU 2018 International Conference, and on behalf of the University Malaya's community, I would like to welcome you to University of Malaya, and to our international participants, welcome to Malaysia. The conference adopts a timely theme, which is Higher Education Partnership for Social Impact. This is aptly in line with our vision of enriching lives and helming the path in playing the role of a national leader in shaping the future of our community. Ladies and gentlemen, for the benefit of our international delegates, please allow me to present a brief overview of the university. The University of Malaya is Malaysia's oldest leading university, and we are situated on a 922-acre campus in the southwest of our capital city, Kuala Lumpur. It has strengthened its position in the academic world both locally and internationally, and is ranked 87th in the QS World University Ranking for 2019. Research at the University of Malaya is being geared towards galvanization of interdisciplinary and cross-faculty collaboration in pooling and encompassing the expertise and resources into 4 research clusters, which are innovative industries and sustainability science, frontier of the natural world, health and well-being, as well as social advancement and happiness. With the research tagline of transforming knowledge, industry, and society, we hope our research will bring impact into the local and global community at large. In conjunction with the IAU 2018 conference, we have organized the University of Malaya's Research Carnival, and in my capacity as the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation, I would welcome all of you to this event, which will be held on campus from the 15th to the 17th November. I hope you'll be around then. Esteemed guests, it is indeed with great pleasure in this IAU conference we showcase the work of one of our research centers in the University of Malaya, which is the Social Wellbeing Research Center headed by Datuk Dr. Norma at the Faculty of Economy and Administration. For this, I would like to introduce Emeritus Datuk Professor Norma, the Director of Research Social Wellbeing Research Center at University of Malaya, as well as the President of Malaysian Economic Association. Professor Norma is actually a professor, emeritus professor now at the Faculty of Economy. She's been with us for quite a while. She was also an advisor to the government for our M10 or our economic unit. So with outstanding and prominent achievement throughout the years, she has worked extensively with local government agency and statutory bodies and international organizations such as the United Nations Development Programme, or UNDP, the World Bank, the International Labour Organization, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the European Union. In line with the theme of the conference today, she will be presenting her lecture entitled Globalization and Single Village of Knowledge. In closing, it is my hope that all of you will enjoy this conference and that our international guests will have a pleasant stay in our city. Last but not least, this conference could not have materialized without the tremendous support from the organizing committee, from the University of Malaya, as well as the IAU committee, and I would like to thank them all for their effort. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a good conference.
Thank you very much, Yang Berbahagia, Professor Dr. Nur Saada Abdul Rahman, Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation. I would like to now call upon Professor Pam Fredman, President of International Association of Universities, IAU, to give her welcoming speech.
Thank you very much for having me here and having us here. I would like to welcome you to this conference, but I will start up with thanking the University of Malaya for having us. It's the 3rd time IAU is here, so you have done a good job before, and as was pointed out before, you are doing a very good job to help IAU to make this conference be an echo. Thank you very much. I would also like to take the opportunity to say that the welcome here with all these students is a very good sign of what you are doing, because the students are what we are working for. The student will be our future ambassadors. And the energy which is coming out from the balconies here, I think everyone noticed. So let us bring that energy to our meeting and to our conference, and let that go through the days we are here. Thank you very much, and welcome, and make this a successful conference together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Pam Fredman. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Allow me to read a brief biodata of Emeritus Professor Dato Dr. Norma Mansor. Professor Norma Mansor is President of the Malaysian Economic Association, MEA. She is Professor at the Department of Administrative Studies and Politics at the Faculty of Economics and Administration, University of Malaya, where she served as Dean from 2004 to 2009. She was also a Ragnar Nursk Visiting Professor at Tallinn University of Technology, Estonia in 2015. Among her notable appointments were Secretary of the National Economic Advisory Council in Prime Minister's Department from 2009 to 2011, advisor and consultant to various local government agencies and statutory bodies, as well as international organizations, which include the United Nations Development Programme, World Bank, International Labour Organization, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the European Union. Professor Norma has written many books and extensively in scholarly journals. Her research interests cover public and social policy, as well as governance and social protection. In recognition of her contributions, Professor Norma was awarded Emeritus Professorship by the University of Malaya at the recent convocation in October 2018. Congratulations, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our distinguished speaker, Emeritus Professor Dato Dr. Norma Mansor.
Thank you, Dr. Adele. Professor Pam Fredman, President of IAU, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening. It is a distinct honor for me to address this August conference on one of the topics that has occupied many public forums and of great interest and concerns of many governments on how globalization and technology has created a single village of knowledge. I will also describe or bring together some of the interpretations out there with my own thoughts and observations. And in addition, how this global village of knowledge impacts societies will be discussed. The presentation will start with debates on globalization, arguments on how globalization has resulted in so many good, but there are also arguments critical of the benefits of globalization. I guess it's the good, the bad, and perhaps the ugly, circulating out there in many discussions. What is the trend regardless? The presentation will then focus on how higher education, benefits and challenges with regards to documentation or democratization of knowledge, and the drawbacks. The presentation will conclude by revisiting some proposals that could have been suggested on other platforms, but worth repeating. Globalization, what do we mean in this context? Although globalization is essentially about a flow of technology, economy, knowledge, people, values, and ideas. It is synonym with mobility in many forms, such as information, knowledge, people, and employment. Additionally, the technological advances drive the process and reduce the cost of information dissemination around the world, which spread information and increase the sharing of knowledge, techniques, and new ideas. The advance of technology, especially in the late 20th and the 21st century, then becomes a vehicle for a faster spread of knowledge, techniques in different educational levels, and this has resulted in the internationalization of knowledge. In other words, countries respond to the demand and supply of knowledge. So one can conclude that globalization is the cause and internationalization is the effect in response to find new solutions to promote knowledge and to compete globally. However, this access to knowledge and information can be perceived as a set of changes. The shaping of new global forms in culture, the media and technologies of communications that nations have to accept and follow in order to embrace global competition and respond positively. Hence, there are groups who view globalization as part of the continuing history of imperialism, or you can call post-colonization, indeed of capitalist development and expansion, or the complex contours of the contemporary capitalism where the power of the nation-state system is declining. It has also given rise, according to this group, to transnational organizations and corporations, and the growing interdependence and interconnectedness of the modern world through increased flows of goods, services, capital, people, and information based on the use of technological advances. And how does it affect higher education, and why is it so important? Higher education is a major concern of all societies. Higher education acts as a foundation and an essential driving force of economic, social, and human development. Education in general is at the heart of the change that is dramatically affecting our world in the areas of science, technology, economics, and culture. It is the reason behind social change and scientific progress, and we see it around us in the last 2 or 3 decades, how this has changed many societies. However, this in turn, higher education or tertiary education, in turn, is subjected to the results of progress that it itself has engendered or even contested, both with regard to content as well as methods and established aims. UNESCO took the lead in 2001, had a meeting in Paris to discuss the impact of globalization on higher education. The principal report, as it was called, included particularly to discuss or to agree on issues or sensitive aspects such as the quality of education, accreditation and the standards of education, and the recognition of qualifications, looking for ways on how one system can accept or respect or recognize another education system or from another system. Now, global sharing of knowledge, techniques, skills, and intellectual assets that are necessary to multiply developments at different levels can be described as what I use it in my abstract, the greater democratization of knowledge. There are many examples around us, and it has been around quite a while. This includes many universities which open branches in many countries. We have a few in Malaysia, Monash University, Nottingham University, and others, where established universities are having campuses outside their home countries. Many offer virtual teaching. The Earth Institute of Columbia University offers the Global Classroom or Master of Development Practice, and we have platform or classrooms such as TED and Coursera, and many others. At our center, SWRC, we have a senior fellow offering a course on social protection to students in Africa and Latin America. Scientific papers can be accessed. Researchers can build on other research. ResearchGate is one good example. And this is about multiplication of knowledge. In fact, I'm awfully envious with graduate students, contemporary graduate students, where you can easily do your research, the references, the bibliography, compared to our time. Yeah? How many years ago? 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades. It depends on how old that you claim to be. Further, it has provided employment and income. Yeah? You're familiar with all the names, yeah? The Lazada, the Grab, etc. But this has provided employment and income to many societies. We can divide this sharing of knowledge and information into 4 main areas. It is around work, market, learning, and databases. Yeah? For work, you have like Grab, Airbnb, Doctor to You, freelance. For market, you have all the likes of eBay's, yeah, the online shopping. Learning, yeah, you have Coursera, I've mentioned earlier, EDX and Stanford Online, and databases. Databases is one of those that is really useful when you talk about knowledge creation. The question is, as I will mention or talk further in the next few slides, is do we, in the developing countries or the LDCs, are able to capitalize or utilize these opportunities or the availability of these databases to solve our own domestic problems. Yeah. One successful case of R&D program, which is adopted by the Korean government, is the Korean National R&D program launched in 1989 with a strategic R&D policy. So it was the government who started by the government, capitalizes on the Western technologies to create itself domestic advanced global technologies such as the plasma or LCD TV and handphones. So the example will be the Samsung. So Korea has succeeded in building up a unique Korean innovation system almost on a barren land. Yeah? So this is one level of innovation, R&D on the hardware or on physical or manufacturing, production manufacturing. Yeah? But one can also talk about innovation in terms of the software. The impact on higher education, however, with globalization, it seems to demand and impose rules and priorities that supersede the long-wished for goal of integration mechanisms for international collaboration in higher education. The essence of internationalization, as mentioned in the white paper of 2000, is to imply collaboration, including marketing, primarily through exchanges or cooperation. The Education for All program, so defined by UNESCO, was established to guarantee the human right to free access to quality education. Equally important issues include institutional autonomy and academic freedom in exercising professionalism to develop relevant and response programs. Hence, the higher education providers essentially are leading innovators in education and training nationally and internationally. Underpinning this is a commitment to achieving excellence in the teaching and learning processes as measured by international standards. Whereas globalization, on the other hand, also implies dealing with higher education on a purely commercial basis. So the fear is that it would challenge many governments' tradition of providing free higher education, which is considered as public good, and endeavor to uproot this fundamental constitution guarantee, as in many countries, it is the basic right of the citizen of that country. As economies globalize, opportunities for the mobility of knowledge workers and knowledge seekers across borders increase. Having an international passport nowadays has come to denote permission to work more than a connection to any collective or any essential collective identity. Another area of concern or of an interest would be on staff development. It is not as easy when establishments are talking about or planning for staff development, either a college or university, because a college or university can easily seek potential candidates elsewhere when you don't have within. And for any government or any establishment, it is harder also to plan for or to establish a long-term staff development and plan costs effectively. Yet, professional development for individuals should be increased in order to maximize the value added to one's potential, thus expanding the opportunities for education and building a lifelong learning society. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, globalization on one hand creates opportunities for the mobility of knowledge, as I mentioned earlier. Workers and knowledge seekers across the world in volumes unprecedented in history. In a particular country, when one cannot find professions or specialists in some areas, one can always seek externally. It also means that an increasing opportunities for any organization or any university to search for potential candidates wherever they might be available. And if professionals are not able to find jobs locally, they are increasingly in a position to look for opportunities internationally. So this is what the single village of knowledge has created. Globalization creates a real impact on the organization of work as well, and the work people do worldwide. And that work is becoming organized around the notions of flexibility. Hence, it is the national government, it is organizations that will have to looking at how one should restructure a social policy and economic process to allow for a free flow of talent. Other challenges to higher education would be, whilst higher education can moderate some impacts of globalization from negative to positive, the phenomenon of globalization, economic growth of the last decade has been accompanied by worsening of inequalities in the world, and in particular, inequalities of access to knowledge. Also, the inability to seize opportunities for the development of individuals and local community in the inevitable process of globalization. Integration into world economy today implies not only mastery of traditional knowledge, but also the capacity to acquire the new skills. It is therefore evident that an unequal sharing of the new communication and information technologies only serves to reinforce existing inequalities. While higher education deficits are obviously greater in developing countries, there is also a major issue in developed countries as well. In many industrialized countries, there is a persistent problem of illiteracy and low skills, which is an important source of social inclusion. Unequal access to education and also fuels growing wage inequality and worsen the income distribution. The uneducated and unskilled in industrialized countries face severe disadvantage in an increasingly competitive global market. Now, as we can see from the next slide, that this shows the spending of education. Is that? No, doesn't seem to work. What happened?
So we can use this one.
Doesn't seem to work, but it's not working. Oh, sorry, sorry. Okay, I have mentioned that. So now I'll go to the next one. All right, okay, thank you. So I will have to do this? Yeah, sure, okay. This slide shows this is an OECD data that shows public spending on education from 1975 to 2018, yeah, as the percentage of the GDP. From the public spending, we can see that how the bubbles are all accumulated around Europe. Some bubbles in the US, because Europe spends more than 20% of the GDP on education, on tertiary education. And if you look at other countries, yeah, East Asia, of course, is better than Southeast Asia, Oceania, and also Latin America. Yeah? The more bubbles there is, the higher concentration or the higher percentage of the GDP. Yeah? Now, if we were to compare with the private spending, do we have the right slide? Yeah. Private spending on, again, within the same period, on higher education, you can see that in the US, it tends to be higher. It's more than 35%, and Europe more than 15%. Yeah? So it's just the opposite between Europe and US. But if you look at other countries, not much is spent on higher education, even from the private spending. Yeah? The next slide shows the spending on, or the gross domestic spending on R&D. Okay. Is it too small? Can you see? The highest is Israel, yeah? And then you have South Korea, and where is the United States? In the red bar, yeah? The red bar is the US. So this shows how much a country spent on R&D among, yeah, as you can see that the richer the country is, the higher is the spending on R&D, yeah? So this is just to describe how unequal the resources are, especially to be spent on R&D. To address the technological gaps and digital divides between advanced and developing and the least developed countries, the following has to happen. Firstly, there has to be a broader global sharing of knowledge, techniques, skills, intellectual assets that are necessary to multiply developments at different levels. Secondly, in facilitating the collaboration, it has to be a mutual support, supplement to produce synergy for various developments of countries, communities, and individuals. We have to facilitate to create values and enhance efficiency. We have to promote international understanding, collaboration, and also the acceptance, more importantly, the acceptance of the cultural diversity among countries or across countries and regions, and communications and interactions, and encouraging multicultural contributions at the different levels among countries. So this is at the international, at the IAU as a community or as a platform, but the national government is not spared. People can only participate or benefit fully from globalization and global competition if they are endowed with knowledge, skills, and with the capabilities and rights needed to pursue their basic livelihoods. Therefore, the national governments have a role to play as well. They have the responsibility to review or to reflect on the educational policy and organize educational achievement accordingly. They should allocate adequate resources to education, basic infrastructure, and the right environment in order for innovation, because innovation and R&D is more organized, but innovation can happen anywhere when you have the right environment. And finally, is to create the institutional framework also based on broad access and opportunity. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, globalization has brought many benefits to developing and least developed countries. However, LDCs and developing countries as well have not been able to fully capitalize on the technologies and knowledge from developed countries. Take R&D, for instance. R&D is still happening in developed countries, the fundamentals, especially the more fundamental type of R&D. And this is due to limited financial or big companies, yeah? This is due to limited financial and human resources, which can affect the creation of a sustainable R&D framework. Hence, sustainable development, a sustainable domestic R&D platform needs to respond to domestic necessities and priorities. It has to be outward-looking development strategy, like the example that I gave earlier in South Korea. The strategy adopted by the South Korean government was to utilize large firms. So large firms have to work with government in order for government to push or to provide the catalyst for large local firms and multinationals to have an industrial policy that would enable domestic or local societies or countries benefit. Human resources, among others, that emphasis should be given towards developing talent, developing resources, human resources, with higher education, not just higher education, but higher skills that is possible to participate in greater R&D or benefit further from the globalization and the single village of knowledge. International and national governments Both have a role to play to fully realize the benefits from this concept of the single village of knowledge. And this is very much in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDG goal number 17 is about partnership. So partnership is not only between public and private, it is also between countries, it is between developing countries, how we can benefit from innovations, or especially even if it's not on fundamental R&D, but providing solutions to some of our social issues. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you for the very insightful presentation, Emeritus Professor Datuk Dr. Norma Mansor. I would open the session now for questions and answers from members of the floor. I think we have 2 mics available in front here. Please state your name and institution, please. Sure, Prof. Pam. There's one over there, and there's another one over here.
So thank you very much for very nice presentations, and also bringing up the bads and the goods of the globalization and internationalization. I had a question which I think we not often raise, and that is, at the end you talk a lot about how important it is to do the research and have that new ideas and new knowledge also for the society, the local society. How do you see the connections between the higher education and the research investments which are being done? Usually the resources are from different fundings, and also both of them doesn't have in mind to really bring the new research into students. So I would like to hear your perspectives of connecting higher education and the research.
Thank you very much. Higher education cannot be separated from research. Although, as I mentioned, the demand of competition and globalization, there are universities who focus just on teaching, without doing much research. But that's the beginning, I thought. It's the beginning of the development of that university, because eventually, because they feed into each other, so eventually this kind of universities will also have to focus or has to work on research. Yes, the universities are getting, especially what's happening in the world is the fiscal limitation. Government everywhere, not just in a country like Malaysia or developing countries, but even developed countries, governments are facing fiscal constraints. So now is the time for private sector to also contribute towards research. So one way of going about attracting research funds is to work with private sector, with big companies or local companies in order to secure funding for research. Malaysia is one of those that has got a big percentage of our business entities, which is small, medium, and this has not been fully tapped into with regards to working with them. So on one hand, you have the applied kind of research, which you can get when you approach, or the potential is bigger when you are talking about public-private partnership. But the fundamental side, the fundamental research, still will have to come from public funding. Do I answer your question? Higher education,
Second question?
Yes.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. I'm Victor Narzari from Assam Don Bosco University. Ma'am, my question to you is, experiences of research in the developing countries as well as some of the least developing countries, and the peripheries within these developing countries as well as the least developing countries actually suggests that research has seldom benefited the people in the periphery. Say, for instance, much research grants that have been spent on doing research for the indigenous and tribal communities in different parts of the world have hardly benefited the indigenous and the tribal communities themselves. So in this context, globalized research for a long time have been considered to be something that has tended to marginalize rather than actually liberate communities from around the world. I would like to hear from you your perspective on this.
Thank you very much. I think platforms such as this could be one of those that would be able to advocate for certain incentives or ways to apportion research funding, that researchers working with researchers from the developed world working with researchers in the developing countries should be given, and I think for some, like EU funding and all that, you will have to have the partner in the developing country. So that's one way of overcoming this lack of benefits going to the developing countries. Yeah? But are you talking about this type of research, or are you talking about the actual R&D, finding solutions or trying to solve problems of the developing countries? Which one are you referring to? Because if you're talking about finding solutions for our domestic problems, especially among developing countries and least developed countries, there are a lot of sharing already. Yeah? For instance, Malaysia, we discovered Nipah virus and the JE virus towards JE. This is also shared with countries with similar experiences. And for the social science, we have, for instance, like the microcredits that was designed or that was established in Bangladesh, but we repeat the same type of microcredits in Malaysia and I think in some parts of the world. So the sharing should not just be among or between developed countries, researchers from developed countries and developing countries, but even among developing countries, yeah? And the LDCs. We can come together because some of our problems are similar, yeah, are common. So we should come together, and it is made easy through, as I mentioned, the databases, yeah, ResearchGate. You can just, put your first cut in the ResearchGate, and people will comment and add to your discussion, and that's how you too can find your counterpart in other parts of the world. So it has never happened before, and of course, this is much to the disappointment of the publication houses, yeah, of the publishers, because they don't have the monopoly of these papers anymore. Yeah? So this is something that is, or as you can say, that this is the benefit of globalization. Yeah. Yes?
Andrew Deeks, University College Dublin. If I understand you correctly, you're promoting a single village of knowledge where there would be a sharing of knowledge, of techniques, of all of the components required for industry across the world, and also a sharing of research. Yet the benefits of globalization come from specialization. So the classic example is the iPhone, which has components manufactured in some 30 countries, and that comes about through specialization. So I'm just interested in how you resolve the sharing with the specialization.
Thank you. Yeah, specialization is one aspect of it. Yeah, the specialized areas where. But even specialized areas, there are cases where researchers from both developed and developed countries come together. Although, as I mentioned earlier, perhaps this is about how capital attracts research and development and also researchers. Yeah? But the more general platform is about sharing. It is about, of course, even when you have a virtual learning platform, every lecture or every platform would have its own nuance on how you deliver certain things. Yeah? So for specialized knowledge, perhaps we still need to work to upgrade on how we share, but at least for the general sharing or the knowledge of more of a general nature can be done. Yeah? One university called, or rather a country called, country which is Dubai, tried to create this global village. I think you are familiar with it, some of you, yeah, in 2004, I think. But they created, built this university, spent so much money, yeah, millions went into it, but it hasn't taken off. So that is the reason why I'm not inclined to suggest that you have a physical facility to generate this, but more of a virtual. A virtual type of exchange or sharing rather than a specific campus. Yeah? So that was what I was going for. But again, as I also mentioned in one of the slides, that the inequality still exists. Specialized areas. How does new discoveries, new innovations happen, especially in science? Yeah? More of the fundamental type of research rarely happens in developing countries, but it happens in established universities. So there are reasons for it, which I've mentioned. It is about resources, it's about talent. So we are still talking about inequalities that exclude, yeah? Until now, that exclude this kind of collaborations between researchers in higher education and also in research centers. Yeah?
First of all, thank you very much for your very comprehensive lecture. My comment on the question is that the globalization of knowledge doesn't necessarily have to be based on commercialization and privatization of knowledge. Good that you mentioned and you gave the argument that the national government need to spend, but you also seems to be somewhat more generous to national government that it is because of the fiscal constraints that they are not investing enough. But there are evidences available that even when the fiscal situation of the governments have improved, they have not necessarily invested enough on education and including higher education. So I think it's also a matter of priority of the national government. Perhaps they have forgotten, I would like to hear your view about the importance of higher education for the national and the societal development. Secondly, it seems that the countries where the universities have been depending more on private funding are now staring at almost a bankruptcy kind of a situation. It means the private funding either through students or even from the corporate contributions are not enough to support the universities, and therefore all the more important for the national governments to keep on investing in education, because that is the investment in future. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't get your last part.
What I'm saying is that there have been countries where the universities have been depending more on private funding, either through international students' fees or through the fees payable by their own students. And now they are experiencing or they are staring at a situation where they are not likely to make any more money. So it's kind of a bankruptcy, insolvency kind of a situation for universities in those countries. Yeah. What I was trying to suggest is that perhaps this makes all the more necessary for the national government to keep on investing in the future, which is higher education.
Thank you, sir. Yes, higher education, investment in higher education. In economics, when we were learning about public goods, yeah, you have literature which suggests that higher education is not a public good. It's more of a private good, because the differentiation will be that if you invest in that, it will bring personal gains. Yeah, it will bring higher returns to whoever, to the individuals that's investing. That's the differentiation. But now more and more people are talking about, or economists are talking about, higher education is about skills. Yeah? So the higher skills that is developed in higher education is necessary when countries want to move to a higher level of development. So governments who are foresighted in investing in higher education tends to see the benefit of public spending onto the overall economy. And countries that believe in this line would be like South Korea, Malaysia is one example, yeah, where government do spend on higher education.
One more question. Yeah.
Thank you, Dadu. It was a wonderful presentation. While you are talking about globalization and how private funding agencies can take part, but I think what we need to incorporate here, that as you rightly said, the physical constraint of the governments, some kind of prevent them to go into research and innovation. But I think as we are in education field and in the various decision making, we need to incorporate in the globalization process of the bureaucrats, the policy makers. See, people like us, we come from private university. When private university does some good thing, but the decision makers, they do not encourage or rather inspire them that, look, you are doing, how I can assist you. But rather, policy makers, decision makers, they will try to see how bring in the bureaucratic rules and regulations so that private universities like us, they are curbed and they cannot progress. I appreciate our previous, the president of Indian Association of University, what he said, that the private universities, they are at the verge of bankrupts. The reason is this, because the policy makers, they think all the time private universities are for money, but that is not correct. And that's need to be really train them, that policy makers, please look at these private universities. They are actually doing a great job of developing human resources, not only in the country, what you call partnership for societal impact. I come from Lincoln University. We have a program in Somalia where very few universities will go. I have a program in Kabul, Kandahar. I am giving an impact, but the policy makers would look into different angle and try to see how we can curb them so that they cannot progress. And the policy makers will not help you any kind of funding that how you can be involved in research and innovation. So I think as IAU, and you come from the university, we got to look at that how we can train the policy makers that look at in a pragmatic views that how the private funding universities, how we can encourage them to make them more participatory in nature to develop the education. That's what I thought we should be including into this conference.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's part of the partnership that I suggested. Yeah, so partnership can happen within a nation where the public and private sector can work together. Yeah, the financial constraints with the government is real, but then again, like our previous professor was saying, that it is a matter of priorities. Now, if this partnership in the SDG is one way of pushing governments not to look at actors in the economy as separate or going against what the government policy is. Yeah? At least in Malaysia, the country that I'm familiar with, yeah, that we bring everyone into the discussion when we talk about economic development and economic growth. Yeah? So we are inspired by Japan Inc., by Korea Inc. Yeah? So one has to, I mean, especially as a planner and as an economist, you have to see the economy as a whole. How one institution, one sector is linked to the other sector. Both are contributing, but one sector plays both, yeah, the regulatory role as well as the provider. Yeah, for those of us who does public policy, we understand that. Yeah, you are, on one hand, you are the authority because you want to ensure standards that standard of higher education is maintained, but at the same time, you are also owners of public universities, right? The bureaucrats I'm talking about. Yeah. And on the other hand, you have the private providers, the private universities, that you are supposed to also supervise or regulate. Now that's where it becomes difficult. Yeah? However, the regulation and procedures should not be about restricting or should not be about limiting the growth of the private sector. Because you talk as an economy, you have to, as one economy, you have to talk to each other. So I don't know how many bureaucrats are there in this room, but bureaucrats have to be brought in. When you talk about the higher education blueprint, it has to be a national agenda, especially when governments are so afraid of having budget deficits, yeah? You get punished. You have a big budget deficit, the rating agencies will downgrade you. So governments are so afraid, and yet deficit means an expansionary budget where government should spend more on areas that is productive, yeah? Or that can bring about productivity in the economy. But for whatever reason, governments all over are so afraid of fiscal deficit. And because of that, then all actors in the economy has to come together and agree upon a goal. So what is the goal of that nation? Until we do that as a nation, unfortunately you cannot get 2 or 3 nations to agree on one goal, yeah? As a nation, when we have that kind of agreement, and everyone should be able to see what's their role in there in order for that nation to move forward. So that's my answer to that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. One more? Just one more? Yeah, that's our last question for the day.
Hi, Prof. Alexander, Universiti Malaya. Recently, there have been talks that more universities will be built in our country. And we already have 20 public universities and about 47 private universities and 9 foreign branches universities. And recently, we have budget cuts on our research and development and deficits on that side. And we need more money to do R&D. With all these problems and constraints, Prof, in your opinion, do you think that we need more universities in the form of physical, like what you mentioned in Dubai, millions of money have been pumping to build universities. So do you think that we need to focus on building more universities physically, or just through this globalization and information technology transfer and knowledge transfer, we can actually share the, ideas and information directly without building more universities in the form of physical?
Thank you.
That's my question.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, he's one of these young researchers at the center. My understanding of the new universities coming is that they are funded not by the Malaysian government, but funded by the investors. Yeah? So universities are established in countries for various reasons. There are also reasons like to become an education hub for the region. Yeah? So Malaysia tend to have that kind of ambition, to be an education hub. So it's not just for Malaysian students. So for Malaysian students, it is good, yeah, competition is good. Then we all have to strive harder in order to attract the best students to come to our universities. But the understanding also is that these universities will be located here because the environment in Malaysia is, you have the video earlier on shown that Kuala Lumpur is one of those cities that people are happy or desire to live, yeah? So, and also because of our multiculturalism, multi-religions and all that would attract students from all over, especially when you talk about becoming international yourself, yeah? Many of the, or graduates of international universities are also a feeder or are also going out there as expatriates. Yeah? So they work in international organizations and all that. So what is, or rather, Malaysia offers that kind of microcosm of the world out there. That you come to Malaysia, you get anything and everything. So learning in Malaysia would provide that kind of environment if a university is interested, is due to that. Yeah? So we are in the region that is most vibrant at the moment, but a lot of the students are also coming from Africa, from Latin America, also from Europe and the US, in order for them to experience a different kind of environment and later perhaps to work in this region. Yeah? So this mobility of students, mobility of universities are happening. The virtual one is also happening alongside, yeah, simultaneously, the physical ones, but for some universities, they want to have that physical presence because although you do it virtually, like some of our colleagues are doing, they also have centers in these different places. Yeah? So again, you still, to some extent, especially when you talk about specialist areas, you do need labs, you do need physical space for people to meet, for professors, researchers to meet and do their work or discuss about their work. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Emeritus Professor Dato Dr. Norma Mansor. Let's give her a warm round of applause. We can continue tomorrow and the day after. With that, we end the inaugural ceremony on behalf of the University of Malaya and IAU 2018 Organizing Committee. Thank you all for making time in your busy schedules to join us here this evening. I wish you all a pleasant IAU 2018 conference, which begins tomorrow with the opening ceremony at 9 a.m. at Pullman KL Bangsa. Before we adjourn, 3 things. There are some light Malay, Chinese, Indian refreshments at the back of the hall. Number 2, at 7:30, there will be a bus at the entrance. Number 3, lucky us, we have the Malaysian press wanting to record group photos of all of us here today. Could we get everybody to stand and move closer to the center of the hall, please? And they'll be snapping from the top of the stage. Could we move slowly to the center of the hall for the group photo? And then we'll leave and have some food. Thank you very much. Have a blessed rest of the day.